Alright guys, UFC Fight Night 167 is now in the books, and in the main event, just like Corey Anderson stole the hype from Johnny Walker back at UFC 244, Jan Blachowicz steals the hype from Corey Anderson with a first round knockout, solidifying his spot for the next title fight against Jon Jones. Corey Anderson came in with his usual movement, being really light on the feet, using some good head movement, using feints, and really mixing it up. However, Jan was not backing down, throwing fire right back at Anderson, timing his hooks very well, and landing a clean uppercut as Corey tried to come in for a takedown. He even showed some good defensive wrestling as Corey tried to take him to the mat. Late in the round, Corey Anderson makes a huge mistake by throwing an ill-advised leg kick right into Jan's range with both hands down, leaving himself wide open for a big right hook from Jan, followed by a vicious hammer fist on the ground to seal the deal. Afterward, Jan made no hesitations in calling out Jon Jones for the next title bout, with Jon Jones in the crowd showing full agreement. Now, of course, Jon Jones has been one of the most dominant champions in UFC history, and definitely the most dominant champion in the light heavyweight division. However, with his last two fights being closely contested, with many believing that he should have lost either of the two by decision, his aura of invincibility is all but gone, which brought a lot of attention to tonight's fight. That being said, after taking some early thoughts into what Jan Blachowicz has in his game that may give Jon Jones some trouble, I gotta say that I have a hard time seeing how he can win this fight. In Jon's fight against Dominic Reyes, Reyes was able to use great footwork, cut angles, and mix up his strikes to the legs, head, and body of Jon to avoid being overwhelmed by Jon's pressure while staying offensive throughout the fight, outstriking Jon for 3 rounds despite the judge's decision. Jan Blachowicz, while technically sound with his boxing and certainly powerful, does not mix up his strikes as well as Reyes, nor does he move or use footwork, and in my opinion, is not as athletic as Reyes. Jan more often than not headhunts with looping hooks, and while I wouldn't call him flat-footed, I'd say that he only moves in 2 directions, either forward or backward, depending on whether his opponent is pressuring forward or trying to counter-strike. Now, I would expect Jon Jones to press forward against Jan Blachowicz, just like he's done in his most recent fights, and considering that, Jan is very good at throwing strikes while backpedaling, as well as having great takedown defense, and has shown to be very dangerous breaking away from the clinch. I'm not too sure if he'd be able to defend Jon Jones' takedowns, but I gotta assume that he'd be working on his defensive wrestling in camp, knowing what Jon Jones brings to the table in the wrestling department. Looking back at Jon Jones' fight with Thiago Santos, Santos, much like Reyes, threw a lot of leg kicks to try to stifle Jon Jones' oblique kicks, which is one of Jon's best weapons in maintaining his distance. He also timed his flurries and was able to land some clean shots on Jon, even with the size and reach disadvantage that he had going into that fight. Jan Blachowicz is just as tall as Thiago Santos, but has a longer reach. He has great leg kicks himself, is good at forcing his way into the pocket while throwing multiple hooks, and has devastating power. These are all factors that can definitely make a fight with Jon Jones competitive, but I don't see them as a definite threat. Jon Jones, in both his fights with Reyes and Santos, showed some excellent head movement and unpredictability in his striking. He's certainly been much easier to land on as of late, but has an incredible chin and an incredible ability to stay composed at all times and take multiple shots without tiring. Also, with Jan not using footwork or cutting angles, I think he's going to be a much easier target for Jon Jones' oblique kicks, which are going to make it especially hard for Jan Blachowicz to force his way through Jon Jones' range. Now, despite me not giving Jan Blachowicz much of a chance here against Jon Jones, we have to remember that none of us in our right minds gave any chance to Thiago Santos or Dominic Reyes in their fights with Jon Jones, and they arguably both won their fights in many of the fans' eyes. Thiago Santos especially surprised me in his fight, as he came in being known as a reckless brawler and showed us a very sharp and technical game against Jon. With all the major upsets that we've seen in MMA, we never know what kind of changes an underdog is going to make in their game in order to step up against a dominant champ in the biggest, most important fight of their lives. Jan Blachowicz was the underdog going into this fight, and reminded all of us that he is a dangerous opponent for anyone in the light heavyweight division. And I wouldn't count out the possibility of him pulling off what would be one of the biggest upsets in MMA history. Assuming this fight is next, I'll definitely be watching to see what happens. Once again, I want to sincerely thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.
Yeah, like I said, as long as these guys are dreaming of being the champion, being the best in the world, they're going to have to meet me, and I'll always have a job. All right, guys. All right.